Join me as I move through my day and talk about dating all 12 zodiac signs. So it seems appropriate to start with Aries and my morning yoga routine. I really have only dated a couple of Aries guys. When I was younger, I was not a fan at all, which is pretty interesting because my North Node is in Aries and so is my Jupiter. But every Aries man I dated, like in my early 20s, they were just all so full of themselves and they would talk a lot and they would talk about themselves. So I used to really stay away from them. And then eventually there was a younger guy, Aries guy, that I dated for a little bit. He was in Russia. And interestingly enough, he was a cop. So I think, which is very fitting. When we met, he was a driver, and then he quickly transitioned to become a cop. We didn't date for a really long time. But his story, he kind of came from a broken home. He was very much close with his mom, but then his mom ended up leaving him and his dad. So he cut off his mom and wasn't in touch with her. I don't know how much she was trying to be in touch with him, but there was definitely a story, like a very typical Aryan story of overcoming hardship. He also had Venus in Pisces, so he was very dreamy and at times very flaky, very hard to pin down. Definitely like didn't always know what's going to happen. But in true Aries fashion, he was brave and very direct because we met once while he was a driver, so he was driving me and my mom, right? And then he reached out to me right away and we started talking. He like asked me out right away. I think my perspective on Aries men has definitely changed. Also, I'm a Libra rising, so Aries is my seventh house. So I think this energy of masculinity, entrepreneurship, courage has always been attractive to me. Taurus is a sign I could write a book about. I've been friends with Taurus women my entire life. I've dated quite a few Taurus guys, with two being especially significant because the first guy that ever said I love you to me was a Taurus, and then my first relationship was with a Taurus. I love Taurus men for sure. They are very stable. They make you feel so stable as well. They promise you things. They talk about the future. They talk about starting a family with you. They look at you as if you are the only woman that exists. The first ever crush I also had was a Taurus. He was like this stylish motorcycle riding. Sometimes Tauruses definitely have their wild side to them. And if you are someone who dated a lot of Tauruses, do share what you think. They're very generous. They're very loving, very sensual, right? Sometimes like a little slow moving, maybe, but very committed. I think it's hard for them to move from the person they love for sure. But then once they do, they will continue to make promises and talk about the future with the next person, which I think is just something that's common for them because they want that stability. They want that future. My first boyfriend was a Taurus as well. He was really good with his hands. He also had a Virgo moon. So I'm a Virgo sun. And that's probably why I get along with Taurus men and women so well, because it's a Virgo Taurus combination, both earthy signs. The negatives, they can be very possessive. Once they've chosen you, they expect you. Sometimes they almost treat you a little bit like their property. Like I had one Taurus guy tell me that his girlfriend is not allowed to travel with her single friends because he just doesn't trust the friends. He knows what's going on and he wouldn't let her travel alone. And there was another guy who basically told me that he likes my hair a certain way and I should keep it that way. And he expects me to behave a certain way. So in that regard, I think for my Gemini moon, they're a little bit too stuck in their ways sometimes. And but the beauty and the stability and the warmth and the generosity and the love that they show you is very hard to come by in other signs, I think. Gemini My boyfriend is a Gemini. This is the longest, the happiest relationship I've been in. For the longest of times, I'm not gonna lie, I was really prejudiced against Geminis because this is the sign of my mother and we have a very complicated relationship. So I used to think that um, every Gemini was the same and I kind of was biased against them. But when I dove into astrology and discovered that my moon is in Gemini, this is actually a really nice compatibility because I can be curious and chatty. And so are, of course, Geminis. My boyfriend is very, very talkative. He always shares fun facts with me. He uses words that I never used, and I'm not a native speaker, so I wouldn't use some of the words that he's using. So he's teaching me things, and it's really important for him to be considered smart. So, and he is. He always needs to have something playing in the background. Like he can't just have a quiet environment, either listening to things or having like a TV or show, like TV show or a film playing in the background. And he loves moving things around. Like as a Virgo, I would find the best way and I would stick to it. For him, he definitely like needs to keep moving and keep like, by the way, I'm setting my agenda for the day. I'm sort of journaling, but I'm talking to you guys. So yeah, he doesn't sit still. He likes variety, and so it works with my Gemini moon that actually needs variety. So it's a good match, except when we argue. When we argue, none of us wants to budge because we both think we're right. But love him. Love him. Love the Geminis. Let's talk about Cancer. So I never actually dated, like I was never in a relationship with a Cancer, but I did go out with a few. There was a guy I worked with when I worked in TV production, and we were close friends. And I feel like he was trying to move it towards dating, but because he's a Cancer, he was never direct about it, right? So I think that's like one thing to know about Cancer men and dating Cancers in general. They might wait for you to make a move. They might not be the most kind of obvious in when it comes to making their move on you. So we went out to a few things. We went to a baseball game together. I went to some of his family events. He was very, very close with his family. He had some also, I think you may say, kind of daddy's issues because he like really wanted the approval of his father who was working in the same industry, and he was very sensitive. We actually stopped talking at some point because something I said really hurt his feelings. And I don't know, I guess with my Aries placements, I can be quite direct sometimes. And so I can say things that, especially for Cancers. There was also this other guy. I went out on a couple of dates with him. He was really, really nervous. And then I discovered that he actually came to the date tipsy. And like he really wanted me to give him another chance. So I did. I went on a second date with him. And it was more like, let's get together and see my friends. And I was like, okay, maybe when he's with his friends, he's going to be a lot more chill and relaxed and they can support him and he's not going to be nervous as much. But no, he was just as nervous and definitely passive aggressive. At some point I told him that I'm going to leave, and then I said that we're not going to see each other again most likely. And he did this like weird thing where he was like, okay, bye, and then he walked off, and then he came back because he didn't want to leave me standing there. And he like said something, the F word Russians, implying that my behavior somehow is a reflection on like all the Russians. So that was not a good experience for sure. But I think, Cancers definitely have good qualities. And with my boyfriend being a Cancer Venus, I really like Venus and Cancer a lot because they are very nurturing, good at cooking and taking care of you, and really, pretty amazing. So let's talk about Leos. I have a very close friend who is a Leo, and I can confirm that Leo men tend to be really, really generous. And they are the man of their word. They promise something to you, they're likely to show up and deliver. That might come with being a fixed sign. So my Leo friend, we've traveled together quite a lot, and he's always been very generous and very, whenever I would come to Russia, he would drive and pick me up at the airport. So very reliant. In terms of dating Leos, there was this one guy. I noticed him and I approached him, so that probably immediately boosted his ego and made him. He was very attractive. He was a mover, and I was walking past the truck and I kind of saw him unloading things, and I was like, "Oh, he's cute. I want to like talk to him." So I came up with some kind of like fake reason to ask him a question. I said, "A friend of mine is considering moving. How can she hire them?" And then we exchanged numbers. It was here in New York, and he was actually Russian. So we exchanged numbers and we went on one date. He ended up mostly just talking about himself, and the conversation was very long. And the way he was telling the story was also told in this very, very long kind of way. And I, being again a Gemini moon, it's really hard for me to deal with people who tell very, very long stories, because sometimes I'm like, I'm ready. Let's move on. Let's talk about something else. So that was not a happy dating experience. But other than that, he was definitely very nice. Virgos, I have mostly been friends with. I feel like we as Virgos tend to be pretty anxious and precise and specific and perfectionist. And so if you carry those kind of qualities yourself, it may be hard to connect with somebody who is as perfectionist as you are. What I've noticed though about going on dates with Virgos is they definitely appreciate your kind of natural beauty and natural look and sort of cleanliness and clear lines and like good style and things like that. There was one guy I met, he was working as a porter at a hotel. I believe it's called a porter. And we spent a lot of time talking. Sometimes I think with a Virgo, you need to stimulate their mind. So if you're having an interesting conversation, you keep the conversation going. That's how you can potentially attract the Virgo. So I really like them as friends. I think dating is a little bit difficult for me just because I already have a lot of Virgo planets myself. My boyfriend does have Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn in Virgo. And so in him, I definitely see this appreciation of like just being natural. He doesn't want me to color my hair. He doesn't want me to use a lot of makeup. He likes when I'm just like fresh out of the shower. That's his perfect sort of very attractive for him. So that's a part of the Virgo experience too. Let's talk about dating Libras. I have really only dated one Libra, but it was a relatively serious relationship. We worked together. I was at first a little hesitant because I wasn't sure that dating him was the right idea. He was very charming, a few years older than me, but you couldn't tell. Everyone was always shocked. They were always like, "Oh, no way, he's actually this age." And like, yeah, he was a little older, but definitely had this like playful, childlike quality to him. Very much a jokester in general. It was really hard to talk seriously with him about anything. Oh no, oh, losing some petals. He had a nice sense of style. He sort of, as a true Libras, I think, as a Libra rising myself, Libra Mercury, they're constantly looking for balance, and it's a little hard for them to find it. So a lot of times they end up like flip flopping, right? So he would go through these periods where he would drink beer and just sort of chill and not worry about his health. And then when he was getting ready to take care of his health, he would wake up at like 5 in the morning and needed to exercise every day. So it was like the true Libra scale, back and forward, back and forward. What was difficult for me is the indecision. And the indecision applied to talking about our future and where things are going. It was also really hard to talk seriously to him about things. I don't know if it's because he was a Libra or because, some other like childhood trauma or whatever, but he definitely preferred to joke around and not to talk seriously about things. And he never really knew what he wanted. So he didn't know what he wanted with our relationship. And he really wanted to stay friends after things ended. And I don't even remember if we ever had like a proper conversation about like are things ending between us? What's the future? But he kept on texting me, and all of the texts were always very joking, like sort of jokester type of texts, never really super serious or let's discuss what happened. I think I have good feelings about him, but I don't know, like 3.5 out of 5 would maybe not recommend. But that's just my experience with one single Libra. Don't take it to mean that this is 100% never date or get together with Libras. You are familiar with this angle. I'm about to start filming YouTube video, but I want to tell you about my experience dating a Scorpio. I've dated a couple, at least I talked to a couple. My online dating experiences with Scorpio have not been great. A lot of times they would switch the conversation towards sex, and then it was really difficult to move it in another direction, which it's one thing to do that once you've been dating for a while or even after you met, right? There could be like gray area, but it's a different story if you're doing it with someone you've never met. That's like, I'm not a big fan of that. There was one guy that I dated a little bit more seriously. We went on a couple of dates. From the beginning, he told me that he's been with over 100 people. So speaking of Scorpio and the reputation they get about sleeping around or being like the heartthrobs, right, of the Zodiac, the most sexual sign of the Zodiac. His Mars was in its detriment in Libra. So while he did sleep around, he wasn't very discerning. And later I discovered that he didn't have like a really good hygiene when it comes to his sexual health. Like he wasn't, paying attention to everything. And he seemed to have, like, he was definitely good at remembering things, an interesting conversationalist. He was really good at investigating. At some point on our date, I lost a bracelet and he looked through our pictures and he found the exact spot it fell down on, and we like rushed back to find it, like in a true detective movie. Sadly, we didn't find it, and things never got too serious between us, but he did become really manipulative at the end and showed and sort of flipped on me and tried to play it as I was doing the wrong thing and he was perfectly fine. So that was definitely a sign for me, like a really major red flag, that I don't want to be with someone who cannot communicate properly and ends up flipping the script. And after that, a few weeks after that, he sent me a message saying that I was like the nicest person ever to hug, which was very sweet, but he was kind of drunk, and so not the best example of dating a Scorpio. Do you have yours? Share in the comments below. I am getting ready for a client, so I did one YouTube video. Let's talk about Sagittarius. I have never really dated a Sagittarius. I feel like as a Virgo, Sagittarius squares my sun, so sometimes it's really hard to connect with them. It might also be because my Saturn is in Sagittarius, so I feel like it takes you a while to get comfortable with your Saturn, so it took me some time to familiarize myself with that energy. And if you've dated Sagittarian men, please share what that was like. But I had a friend that I worked with for a while, and he was married and they were expecting a child. And to me, he just felt like he was very wise. So one Sagittarian quality for sure. He would give me advice. He would kind of talk me through like finances and decisions to make. And he was a video editor while I was an aspiring video editor. So he gave me a lot of career advice. And at the time he was telling me that he was also giving me relationship advice, telling me that the best places to meet men are at the bookstore. And the second one was at a softball game. So he was like, you should join a softball league. But he was, I don't know, I've never looked at his entire chart, but he was a very like ambitious person, and he was very hardworking and like a really good example of a family man, because when the baby was born, his wife wanted to stay home with her for a couple of years. So he was the sole provider, and he had like a daytime job doing reality television, and he had he was also working as an editor on a movie at nighttime, and together with being a parent. So maybe there was a little bit of that Sagittarian desire to be free and do his own thing while still having responsibilities, but he was very, very impressive for sure. I am finally done with the client and going for lunch. It's almost 3 and I'm super hungry. But let's talk about Capricorn. So as a Virgo, Capricorn is another earth sign. So we always get along. Starting from me being in college in Russia, I had a Capricorn guy who was crushing on me, and he would come up to me and say, "Be afraid of me," which was really funny. And I guess his way of expressing his feelings and his affection. And then more recently, when I guess it was like a few years ago, pre-pandemic, I went on a couple of dates with an older Capricorn guy. He was a little bit older than me. He took me to like a fancy restaurant, was very generous, very well put together. He was European, but staying in New York. And after I told him that I don't really see a romantic future, he really wanted to stay friends. And so we continued to be in touch. Actually, when he was leaving New York, he invited me to stay at his place. Like he left, but the apartment was still open for another week. So I stayed over there, and we had like a really nice friendship for a few years. I even met him recently with his current girlfriend. And then I also went on another date with a Capricorn who owned his own construction business. So very much the example of a ambitious, hardworking, put together earth sign. So I only really had good experiences with Capricorns, but never seriously dated one. There was one Aquarius I dated. He was a psychotherapist. His moon was in Scorpio. Both signs, I think, that are interested in understanding humanity. Aquarius from a more rational perspective, and Scorpio from the emotional perspective. We went on 2 dates. Our first date was on Zoom because it was during the pandemic. He was very nice. He bought me dinner, even though we were not meeting in person. And then the second date, he came to my neighborhood and we went to an Italian restaurant. And then at the end of it, he was going to kiss me. And then I was like, oh, I don't know if he also actually asked. He was one of those people who asks you whether he can kiss you. And I said, I'm not sure because I don't usually kiss on the first date. And then he reminded me that it was technically our second date. But then in the end, it didn't work out because I usually need more communication. And he was very Aquarian in a way where he wouldn't text me and disappear for a while, which didn't really work for me. And then there was one left. My experience with Pisces, I dated a Pisces guy for 3 months. And it started pretty well. He was romantic, he was affectionate, he was dreamy and unique in so many ways. We had exciting conversations, we talked about the future, but there always felt perhaps some type of like barrier where I couldn't completely understand him. And we were not on the same page. I wanted commitment, I wanted a serious relationship, and he was way more interested in exploring his life, dating around, not committing to anyone. So it didn't work out, but I think Pisces are definitely some of the most like magical and dreamy people to date, but it may be hard to expect like clarity from them, and you probably shouldn't try to catch them, right, and make them be a certain way because that's not going to work out. If you want stability, go find yourself a Taurus or a Capricorn, but then it might get boring, right, because too much stability. So a Taurus with some Gemini placements. Or a Cancer or any other sign, because we're all great. So this is it. Thank you for watching. Let me know if you enjoyed this type of video, following me along, looking at New York behind me. If you have any other suggestions on what I can do, or if you have stories to share about your dating experiences, if you find yourself attracting a certain zodiac sign and just being ready to write a dissertation or doctorate about them, please share in the comments below, and I'll talk to you very soon. Subscribe if you haven't yet.